My name's Monica, and I don't remember a time when my parents weren't fighting. Their screaming matches are some of my earliest memories, filling our house with tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. I was just a kid, but even then I knew something was seriously wrong. I was 4 when everything came to a head. Mom and Dad's arguments had gotten worse, if that was even possible. One night I woke up to the sound of shattering glass and my mom yelling, "That's it, Mark, I've had enough." The next morning, Dad was gone. Just like that, my family was torn in two. It didn't take long for Dad to move on. Within months, he'd remarried some woman named Caroline and moved across town. From then on, our relationship became a joke. He'd call on holidays, his voice distant and awkward, like he was talking to a stranger, not his own kid. The rest of the year, the only sign I had a father was the monthly Aloni check he sent to Mom. Mom, for her part, was a mess. Linda Thompson, once the picture of a happy housewife, now a single mother struggling to keep it together. She threw herself into her work as a real estate agent, but it was obvious she was floundering. I was 7 when Mom started getting weird. She'd always been a bit impulsive, but this was different. One day she came home with a bunch of books and DVDs about day trading. "This is it, Monica," she said, her eyes shining with a manic gleam that scared me a little. "We're going to be rich." For weeks she was glued to her computer, muttering about stocks and trades. She'd forget to pick me up from school or to make dinner. When I'd ask her to play with me, she'd wave me off. "Not now, sweetie, mommy's working on our future." But our future wasn't looking too bright. I learned to F for myself pretty quick. By 8, I could make my own meals, even if it was just a peanut butter sandwich, do my own laundry, and get myself ready for school. Mom was too caught up in her get-rich-quick schemes to notice. Things came to a head when I was 9. Mom burst into my room one day, her eyes wild with excitement. "I'm going on a trip to Bal. I found someone who can help us, sweetie. He's going to show me how to unlock my luck chakra. This is going to change everything." I didn't know what a luck chakra was, but I knew it sounded like trouble. And just like that, I was shipped off to Aunt Rachel's, my mom's friend, while Mom chased her latest crazy scheme halfway across the world. For 6 long weeks, I lived with Aunt Rachel while Mom was off on her spiritual journey in Bali. Don't get me wrong, Rachel was great. She really tried to make things normal for me. "Come on, Monica," she'd say with forced cheerfulness every morning. "Time for summer camp." I dragged myself out of bed, pretending to be excited about another day of crafts and organized fun, while my mind was miles away, wondering what the hell Mom was doing on the other side of the world. Weekends with Rachel were better. We'd go to the zoo or the beach, and for a few hours I could almost forget the mess my life had become. But then I'd catch her looking at me with pity in her eyes, and reality would come crashing back. When Mom finally came back, it was like she was a whole new person. Her eyes were bright, her smile wide, and she couldn't stop talking about positive thinking and manifesting wealth. "Monica, sweetie, our lives are about to change," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of incense and something else I couldn't quite place. "I've unlocked my true potential, you'll see." It started small. A lottery ticket here, a scratch card there. Mom would come home giddy with excitement over a $20 win, treating me to pizza and new clothes like we were millionaires. "See, Monica. The universe is rewarding us," she'd say, waving the ticket in the air like it was made of gold. I should have known it was too good to be true. Soon the small bets weren't enough. That's when the casino trip started. The first time she went, she came home at dawn, reeking of cigarettes and cheap perfume, but grinning from ear to ear. "I won $500, she exclaimed, throwing a wad of cash on the kitchen table. "This is just the beginning, honey. Soon we'll be living in a mansion." I forced a smile, but my stomach was in knots. Something told me this wasn't going to end well. As the weeks went by, Mom's trips to the casino became more frequent. Sometimes she'd win, coming home in a whirlwind of manic energy, talking smile a minute about her system and how she'd cracked the code. But more often she'd slink in quietly, her eyes red and puffy, smelling of booze and defeat. The good days were getting rarer, and the bad days, well, they were getting a lot worse. One weekend, Mom disappeared for 2 whole days. She left me with a stack of frozen dinners and a stern warning. "Remember Monica? This is our little secret," she said, her eyes hard. "If anyone asks, I'm not feeling well and I'm resting in my room. Got it." When she finally came home Sunday night, she looked like hell. Her clothes were rumpled, her hair a mess, and she couldn't even look me in the eye. "Mommy just had a bit of bad luck, but don't worry, it'll turn around soon. I can feel it." But it didn't turn around. The trips got longer, the losses bigger. I started dreading the sound of her key in the lock in the early hours of the morning. A quiet entry meant a good night at the tables. A slam meant losses, and those were happening more and more often. Grandma Elizabeth was like a breath of fresh air in the suffocating mess my life had become. She lived in the next state over, but she made a point of visiting every few months. Those visits became my lifeline, a glimpse of normally in the chaos. But they were also incredibly stressful. The minute we got word that Grandma was coming, Mom would go into full-on panic mode. "Monica," she'd yell, already pulling out cleaning supplies. "We need to get this place in shape. Your grandmother can't see it like this." And so began the frenzied cleaning spree. We'd spend days scrubbing, dusting, and hiding evidence of Mom's hobby. Dirty dishes that had been piling up for weeks suddenly vanished. The overflowing ashtrays were emptied, and the lingering smell of stale smoke was masked with air freshener. But the worst part wasn't the cleaning, but the lying. Now remember, Mom would coach me, her eyes hard and serious. "Everything's great. I'm doing well at work, and we're very happy. Got it." When Grandma Elizabeth would finally arrive, I'd plaz her on a fake smile and pretend everything was just peachy. But inside I was screaming. I wanted so badly to tell her the truth, to beg her to take me away from all this. But I couldn't. I couldn't betray Mom like that. Grandma Elizabeth didn't know that the money she kept sending us, money meant for my care and education, was going straight into the casinos. Mom would cash the checks and be out the door before the ink was dry, chasing that elusive big win that would solve all our problems. As I got older, it became harder to ignore the reality of our situation. There were days when the fridge stood empty, and I'd have to ration my school lunches to make them last through dinner. On my 12th birthday, Grandma Elizabeth made a gesture that would change everything. She came to visit, bringing with her a shiny new smartphone, the kind all the cool kids at school had. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," she said, handing me the gift-wrapped box. "Linda, I've got something for you too. I've opened a college fund for Monica. It's in your name since she's still a minor, but it's for her future. Just promise me you'll use said wisely." Mom nodded, tears in her eyes. "I swear, Elizabeth. I'll never touch that money for anything else. Monica's future means everything to me." As I hugged my grandmother goodbye later that day, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this was the turning point. Maybe now, with my future secure, Mom would finally get the help she needed. At first, everything was fine. Mom started going to Gamblers Anonymous meeting Ings, picked up some real estate clients again. I threw myself into my studies, daring to dream about college and a future free from the chaos of the past few years. But like all the times before, Mom's resolve didn't last. Within months, she was back to her old habits. The excuses started small. "I'm just too tired for the meeting tonight, honey. I'll go next week." But next week never came. Soon, she was disappearing for days at a time again, leaving me to fend for myself. I was 13 now, and I'd become scarily good at being the adult in our household. I could forge Mom's signature perfectly on school documents, a skill born from necessity rather than rebellion. I even taught myself to cook, whipping up simple meals from whatever I could scrup in our perpetually bare pantry, anything to keep my stomach from growling during class. As I entered high school, I withdrew more and more. Making friends felt impossible. How could I invite anyone over when I never knew what state the house or Mom would be in? The few times I tried to open up, I was met with blank stares or awkward silence. No one could understand what my life was really like. By 16, I was desperate for some control over my life. That's when I decided to get a job. The local coffee shop was hiring, and to my surprise, the manager hired me on the spot. That coffee shop became my sanctuary. For a few hours each day, I could pretend to be normal, just another teen working her first job, not the daughter of a gambling addict barely keeping her head above water. And the money, well, it wasn't much, but it was mine. But reality has a way of shattering even the most carefully constructed illusions. One night after a late shift at the coffee shop, I came home to find the front door unlocked. Alarm bells went off in my head immediately. Mom might be irresponsible, but she always locked the door. The house was a disaster. Clothes strewn everywhere, dishes piled in the sink, and a smell I couldn't quite place hanging in the air. Then I heard it, muffled sobs coming from the living room. I found Mom sprawled on the floor, an empty wine bottle clutched to her chest like a lifeline. She was on the phone, her words slurred and barely coherent. "I've lost everything." she was saying, her voice breaking. Just one more chance. I know I can turn it around with one big win. My blood ran cold. I knew, with a certainty, that made me sick to my stomach what she was talking about. I waited until Mom passed out snoring on the living room floor before I made my move. With shaking hands, I opened her laptop. It took me a few tries to find the right banking app and guess the password. But when I did, the truth hit me like a punch to the gut. The account was empty, completely drained. Years of saving, Grandma's generous gift, my entire future, gone. I stormed into the living room where Mom was still passed out. I shook her awake, my hands trembling with rage. "Mom, wake up! We need to talk about the money!" She blinked at me. Confusion and pain etched across her face. "What, Monica? What are you talking about?" "The college fund, Mom. The one Grandma set up for me. The one you swore you'd never touch. It's gone." For a moment, she just stared at me. Then she tried to deny it, her voice weak and unconvincing. "No, no, you must be mistaken. I would never." But as I laid out the evidence, the empty account, the late-night phone call I'd overheard, her denials crumbled. In their place came the accusations. "You ungrateful brat!" she screamed, her face contorted with rage and shame. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? Snooping through my private information?" It was like a dam had burst. Years of resentment, fear, and disappointment came pouring out of both of us. We screamed and cried, hurling bitter words at each other like weapons. And then it happened. In a moment of blind fury, Mom's hand lashed out, catching me across the face. The force of the blow knocked me back, and I felt a sharp sting where her ring had cut my cheek. I raised a hand to my throbbing cheek, feeling the warm trickle of blood. Without a word, I turned and fled to my room, locking the door behind me. I slid down to the floor, my back against the door, and finally let the tears come. That night I made a decision. I couldn't stay here anymore. I packed a backpack with some clothes and the little money I'd saved from my coffee shop job. As the first light of dawn crept through my window, I slipped out of the house without a backward glance. When I showed up on Dad's doorstep, his reaction was lukewarm at best. He invited me in awkwardly, shooting apologetic glances at Caroline, his wife, who didn't even try to hide her annoyance at my presence. I poured out the whole story. Mom's gambling, the empty college fund, the fight. I watched Dad's face change from shock to anger, and finally to a resigned weariness that made my heart sink. I spent that night in their guest room, feeling like an intruder in what should have been my second home. As I lay there staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, I realized I'd been foolish to hope for rescue. My suspicions were confirmed the next evening when I overheard Dad on the phone with Mom. "You need to come get her, Linda," he hissed, his voice low but clear through the thin walls. "This isn't my problem. I've been paying child support for years. That should have been more than enough to cover her education." I crept back to the guest room, my heart heavy with the final death of a hope I hadn't even realized I'd been clinging to. As I sat on the edge of the bed, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't stay here. The next morning, I sat on the bus, my backpack clutched to my chest, watching the miles tick by. I was headed to Grandma Elizabeth's house in the next state over. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot I had left. My stomach turned with anxiety. What if Grandma turned me away too? What if Mom had already gotten to her with lies and excuses? I'd been let down so many times before, I wasn't sure I could handle another rejection. When I finally arrived at Grandma Elizabeth's house, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I stood on her porch for what felt like hours, trying to work up the courage to knock. But I needn't have worried. The moment Grandma opened the door and saw me standing there, her face went from shocked to concerned to fiercely protective in the span of seconds. "Monica, sweetheart, what are you doing here? Are you all right?" Before I knew it, I was wrapped in her arms, sobbing out the whole miserable story. The gambling, the lies, the empty college fund, the fight with Mom, Dad's rejection. All of it came pouring out in a flood of tears and broken words. Grandma listened to it all, her face growing stormier with each revelation. When I finally finished, she cupped my face in her hands, her eyes blazing with determination. "You're safe now, honey," she said, her voice firm and reassuring. "We're going to fix this together." Grandma Elizabeth wasted no time. She called her friend, who was a lawyer, discussing terms like paternal rights and gambling that made my head spin. But mostly, she was preparing for the confrontation I knew was coming. When Mom finally arrived, summoned by Grandma's demands, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked small and defeated, nothing like the towering figure of my childhood. But the moment she opened her mouth, I realized some things hadn't changed at all. "Elizabeth, thank goodness you called," Mom said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I've been so worried about Monica. She's been acting out, telling wild stories. I just don't know what to do with her anymore. I've tried my best, but she's been so difficult, so ungrateful." But Grandma Elizabeth wasn't buying it. Without a word, she opened her laptop and pulled up the bank statements showing the now empty college fund. "Would you care to explain this, Linda?" Grandma asked, her voice ice cold. The color drained from Mom's face as she stared at the screen. Her mouth opened and closed a few times, but no sound came out. It was like watching a balloon deflate. "I can explain," she finally stammered. "Things have been tough, and I just needed to borrow a little. I was going to pay it back." But her excuses were weak, and she knew it. I could see the panic in her eyes as she realized she wasn't going to be able to lie her way out of this one. And then, in a last desperate attempt to regain control, Mom's face hardened. "You know what? I don't have to explain myself to you. I'm Monica's mother. That money was in my name. I had every right to spend it how I saw fit." Grandma Elizabeth's eyes flashed with a fierce determination I'd never seen before. She leaned forward, her voice low and dangerous. "You're right about one thing, Linda. There's no legal document stating that money was exclusively for Monica's education. It was a trust placed in you, which you betrayed. But let me be clear about what I can do." Mom's smug expression faltered as Grandma continued. "That house you've been living in, the one you've neglected for years? I bought that as an investment property, and I'm selling it immediately." Mom's face went pale. "You can't do that. Where will we live? Grandma raised an eyebrow. "There is no we, Linda. The proceeds from the sale will go towards Monica's education and setting her up with a small apartment near her chosen college." I felt a surge of hope, quickly followed by fear as I saw Mom's face contort with rage. But Grandma wasn't finished. "Furthermore, I'm suing for custody of Monica. Your gambling addiction, financial abuse, and that little physical altercation you had, all grounds for termination of parental rights." The room fell silent. I held my breath, watching Mom's face as the reality of her situation sank in. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. What followed was a whirlwind of legal activity. Mom, faced with losing everything, fought back hard at first. She hired this slick lawyer who tried to paint me as some troubled teen and Grandma as a meddling old woman. But the evidence against her was overwhelming. My teachers came forward, talking about how my grades had slipped, how I'd sometimes come to school looking exhausted or hungry. My manager from the coffee shop testified about my work ethic, how I'd sometimes beg for extra shifts even when I was dead on my feet. With each testimony, I watched Mom shrink a little more in her seat. But the final blow came from an unexpected source. Mom's sponsor from Gamblers Anonymous broke the code of anonymity to testify. She stood up in court and laid it all out. Mom's severe addiction, her repeated relapses, her refusal to truly engage with the program. That was the moment Mom finally broke. As the sponsor spoke, I saw something crumble in Mom's eyes. When she took the stand, gone was the defiant, lying woman I'd known for years. In her place was someone small, broken, and finally honest. "I have a problem," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I've hurt my daughter. I've betrayed her trust. I've ruined everything." As I watched my mother break down on the stand, confessing to years of addiction and neglect, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me was relieved to finally hear her admit the truth. Part of me was angry that it had taken this long, that it had to come to this. And part of me, a part I wasn't proud of, felt a grim satisfaction seeing her finally face the consequences of her actions. But mostly I felt tired, so incredibly bone-deep tired. As Mom's sobs echoed through the courtroom, I closed my eyes, hoping that somehow, some way, this nightmare was finally coming to an end. The judge's gavel came down with a finality that echoed through the courtroom. In the matter of custody for Monica Thompson, the court rules in favor of Elizabeth Thompson. Linda Thompson's parental rights are hereby terminated. Dad was given a chance to step up, to fight for custody, but he didn't even show up to the hearing. His lawyer simply stated that Mark Thompson would not be contesting Elizabeth's guardianship. Just like that, both my parents had washed their hands of me. True to her word, Grandma Elizabeth sold Mom's house. She combined the proceeds with her own savings to set up a new trust fund for my education. This time it was ironclad. The money could only be used for tuition, books, and other school-related expenses. No one, not even Elizabeth herself, could touch it for anything else. As my high school graduation approached, Grandma and I spent our weekends getting ready for my next big step. She'd bought me a small apartment near the college I'd chosen, and we had fun picking out furniture and decorating it. As we worked, we talked about my plans for the future. I decided to major in social work with a minor in psychology. After everything I'd been through, I wanted to help other kids who were struggling. But even as I settled into my new life, I couldn't shake the conflicting emotions that churned inside me. I was relieved to finally have stability, to know where my next meal was coming from, and not have to worry about keeping the lights on. But I also felt guilty. What would happen to Mom now? And as much as I tried to push it down, I was angry. Angry at Mom for her addiction, angry at Dad for his indifference, angry at both of them for failing me so completely. Grandma, perceptive as always, noticed my struggle. "Honey," she said gently one day, "I think it might be good for you to talk to someone. A professional, I mean. Someone who can help you process everything that's happened." It wasn't easy. Dredging up old memories, confronting feelings I'd tried so hard to bury. Some days, I left my sessions feeling wrung out and raw, but slowly I started to heal. I learned that it was okay to be angry, to be sad, to grieve for the childhood I never had. I learned that my parents' failures weren't my fault, and that I didn't owe them my forgiveness until I was ready to give it, if ever. As I packed up my things, ready to move into my new apartment and start my college journey, I made a difficult decision. I wasn't going to reach out to Mom or Dad, not yet. Maybe not for a long time. I needed to focus on myself, on building the life I wanted, free from their chaos and disappointment. As we drove towards my new apartment, towards my new life, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. I knew that. There would be tough days, days when the old pain and anger would resurface. But for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt hope. Real, genuine hope for my future. I was Monica Thompson. I was a survivor. And now, finally, I had the chance to become so much more.